Welcome to the Book Nook. I'm so glad you're here. So think about this for a second. You look at an X-ray, right? You see a jagged white line on a femur.
Right. It's right there in front of you.
Exactly. The doctor points at the film and is just like, there's the break. It's incredibly precise. You have a physical event, maybe a fall, maybe a car accident, and you have this measurable, localized physical result.
Yeah, the diagnosis is contained entirely within the material world.
Right. And we are so conditioned to look at our health through this strictly mechanical lens. A part breaks, you cast it, you wait for the bone to knit back together.
Well, it is a very comforting framework, honestly, because it's entirely visible. We are just biologically wired to trust what we can see and, measure and categorize.
Oh, absolutely.
And when a problem is purely structural, the allopathic model-like Western medicine, it's an absolute triumph of human ingenuity.
But then, you step out of the orthopedic ward and into the realm of, say, autoimmune diseases, or chronic pain that completely defies medication, or sudden systemic failures, and suddenly that X-ray machine becomes totally useless.
Yeah, you enter a diagnostic landscape that is entirely murky.
Right. And what if the true cause of a physical breakdown didn't actually start with a physical impact?
Huh.
What if, like, a chronic issue in your lower back began 10 years ago as this toxic, unresolved resentment toward a family member?
That is the million-dollar question.
It really is. And that is our mission for this deep dive today. We are exploring a book that fundamentally shatters our traditional boundaries between the mind, the spirit, and the physical body. It's called Anatomy of the Spirit: The 7 Stages of Power and Healing by Caroline Myss.
And I have to say, this is just a monumental work.
It really is.
I mean, it doesn't just offer vague platitudes about, managing stress. It provides a highly specific structural map of how these invisible forces, our thoughts, our unresolved traumas, our spiritual crises, literally construct or deconstruct our cellular tissue.
Yes, and we're going to completely unpack that map today. We're going to examine how Myss took 3 distinct ancient spiritual traditions: the Hindu system of the chakras, the Christian sacraments, and the Kabbalistic tree of life, and prove that they're all describing the exact same biological architecture.
It's incredible how she unifies them.
It really is.
Yeah.
She builds this unified map showing that our emotional and spiritual energy is the literal, inescapable foundation of our physical well-being.
Absolutely.
So before we get into the heavy mechanics, I want you to imagine something. Just think about your day so far.
Oh, boy.
Right. Think about every frustrated thought you had in traffic, every grudge you're nursing against a colleague, every unspoken fear you carry about your financial future. Now, imagine a world where every single one of those abstract thoughts is instantly translated into your biology. What if your biography literally becomes your biology?
I mean, that phrase right there, biography becomes biology. That is the bedrock of everything we're about to discuss.
It's so powerful.
Myss argues that this translation isn't just like a poetic metaphor. It is an exact anatomical reality.
Wow.
Yeah. A loss of power in a specific area of your life directly inevitably correlates to a loss of health in a specific corresponding area of your body.
I want to know exactly how she arrived at this, because the origin story of this framework is critical to understanding its validity. I mean, if you hear the phrase anatomy of the spirit, you might automatically picture someone who has spent 30 years meditating on a mountaintop.
Oh, totally. Wearing flowing linen and burning sage.
Exactly. But the author who discovered this was the furthest thing from a mystic.
That contrast is so vital. If we look at Caroline Myss around, say, the early 1980s, she was a hard-boiled, highly cynical professional.
Right.
Yes, she had a master's degree in theology, but she wasn't using it to, seek enlightenment. She was a journalist, a writer, and she ran a publishing company called Still Point.
She functioned on gallons of coffee and chain-smoked cigarettes?
Exactly. She had a profound, active disdain for anything that smacked of the New Age movement.
She actually wrote that she couldn't stand the sound of wind chimes. And she actively avoided people who wanted to talk about, like, organic gardening or crystals.
Yeah, she had zero patience for it.
She refused to meditate because she thought it was a complete waste of productive time.
She was fiercely tethered to the intellectual and the tangible, and yet, against all her own preferences, she began experiencing the spontaneous development of a phenomenon she eventually termed medical intuition.
Spontaneous is the key word there.
Right. It wasn't something she sought out. It would just happen casually. She might be on the phone with a friend who casually mentioned that their husband wasn't feeling well.
And then what?
Suddenly, Miss Storr would receive a highly detailed, spontaneous download of information in her mind. It identified not just the man's physical symptoms, but the exact emotional stressor, like maybe a specific anxiety about his career, that was causing the physical breakdown.
And her insights were terrifyingly accurate.
Very much so.
Terrifyingly being the operative word here, because she didn't embrace this. Word started spreading through her professional network, and people started calling her publishing company to book, intuitive health assessments.
Which she absolutely hated.
She was developing severe migraines from the pressure. I mean, imagine being a skeptical journalist and suddenly feeling like you're being forced to act as a conduit between the divine and sick, frightened people.
She was entirely resistant. She felt completely unqualified.
So what changed?
Well, the turning point, the moment that permanently altered her trajectory and really forced her to formalize this work, occurred on this sweltering summer day in her office. She was exhausted, nursing a headache, and she had agreed to see a woman who was in the late stages of widespread terminal cancer.
Oh, wow.
Miss was dreading the encounter because she knew exactly what question was coming. The woman eventually reached out, put her hand on Miss's leg, and asked, "Why is this happening to me?"
And Miss admits her first internal reaction was just sheer irritation. She thought, how on earth would I know?
Right.
But before she could speak, something profound occurred. She describes this intense flush of energy that physically pushed her own ego, her own personality, entirely out of the way.
It's a crazy description.
She wrote that she felt her consciousness shrink down to the size of a dime. And she was essentially ordered to stand in the corner of her own mind and just watch. A distinct presence completely took over her vocal cords.
And the mechanics of what happened next are just extraordinary. This presence, speaking through Miss, began to systematically walk the dying woman through the entire history of her life.
Like everything.
Everything. It didn't just offer broad, comforting words. It provided microscopic detail. It recalled specific conversations the woman had decades ago. It described moments of profound, silent loneliness where she had wept alone in a room.
Wow.
It detailed every significant relationship, every unspoken resentment, and every deep-seated fear that had covertly controlled her decisions.
It was a complete energetic audit.
Precisely. And more importantly, the presence connected the dots. It showed the woman how those specific, unresolved emotional wounds had functioned like slow leaks in a tire. For decades, her vital life force had been bleeding out into these past traumas. Because she was constantly channeling her energy backward into resentments and fears, she didn't have enough present moment energetic currency to sustain her immune system.
So she literally drained herself.
Yes. The energy of life could no longer nurture her cellular structure, which created the biological environment that allowed the cancer to take root and spread.
Okay, look, I have to stop here and offer some serious pushback.
Go for it.
I am putting myself in the shoes of someone listening to this right now who operates strictly on logic.
Yeah.
It is a massive leap to ask someone to believe that a cynical, chain-smoking publisher suddenly gets hijacked by a divine presence and starts reading a stranger's mind.
It is a massive leap.
I mean, it sounds like waking up one morning and suddenly speaking fluent Mandarin without ever looking at a textbook. If we are going to treat this as a serious framework for health, how do we reconcile the sheer supernatural madness of that origin story?
It's a completely fair question. Miss herself spent years wrestling with the absurdity of it. But we have to look at the underlying mechanism she discovered, which she calls symbolic sight.
Symbolic sight. Okay.
When we hear about mind reading or intuition, we usually associate it with extreme empathy, someone actually feeling the pain of another. But symbolic sight is the exact opposite. It is the highly impersonal, entirely unemotional reading of a person's energetic history.
So she isn't feeling their emotions.
Not at all. Miss Niss describes it as looking through a stranger's family photo album.
Interesting.
You can look at a photograph of a stranger crying, and you can clearly see that they are sad, but you don't actually feel their sadness yourself. It's just data. It is objective visual information.
So it's very detached.
Exactly. Symbolic sight works on the premise that human energy is an objective recording device. Every single second of your life, every attitude you hold, every judgment you make, and every trauma you endure generates a specific energetic frequency.
And it gets stored.
Right. That frequency doesn't just vanish into the ether. It is recorded permanently in your personal energy field.
So it's not about her being like a chosen prophet. It's about her biological receiver suddenly tuning into a frequency of data that is constantly broadcasting from all of us anyway.
Exactly. The energy doesn't lie, and it doesn't editorialize. It is pure data. She just inadvertently developed the capacity to translate that data back into language.
Okay, that makes the concept much more grounded. It's less about mysticism and more about an unseen physics.
Exactly.
And that transitions us perfectly into the actual mechanics of how this energy operates. Because before she could map out this architecture, she had to establish the foundational rules that govern it. She lays out 3 core principles of energy medicine.
Yes.
The first principle we already touched on. Biography becomes biology.
To understand the mechanics of this, we have to stop thinking of our bodies as just meat and bone. Our physical bodies are living, breathing history books. We process our emotional and psychological energy through a highly complex biological system.
Right.
Every single organ and system in your body is calibrated to absorb specific types of emotional energy.
Let's get granular with that.
Yeah.
Because how does an abstract thought actually turn into a cell?
It comes down to chemical translation. When you experience a thought, especially one with a high emotional charge like profound anger or deep grief, your brain immediately translates that energy into corresponding chemical messengers.
Neuropeptides.
Okay, neuropeptides. Yes. These chemicals flood your bloodstream and lock into specific receptor sites on your cells. So if you hold on to a chronic resentment, you are keeping your body in a constant state of producing a specific cocktail of stress chemicals.
And that changes the body.
Over time, those chemicals alter the actual structure and function of the cellular tissue. The emotion literally becomes biological matter. So an experience of profound betrayal isn't just a memory in your head. It becomes a literal density in your cellular tissue.
I mean, this represents a terrifying level of personal accountability.
It really does.
Because we are no longer just saying stress makes you sick. We are saying the highly specific stress of your refusal to forgive your sibling for a financial dispute 5 years ago is currently altering the frequency of the cells in your lower back, leading to your chronic sciatica.
Yeah.
That is the level of specificity we're dealing with.
Which brings us to the second principle. Personal power is necessary for health.
Right.
And we need to redefine power. In our culture, power is almost entirely external. We think of power as wealth, political influence, physical strength, or the ability to intimidate or control others.
Yeah, totally.
But in energy medicine, power is strictly internal. It is your capacity to hold on to your own life force.
There is a case study in the book that illustrates this brilliantly. Myss eventually partnered with a prominent holistic physician, Dr. Norman Shealy.
Yes, great story.
He asked her to intuitively evaluate a patient of his, a woman who was suffering from severe, intractable depression and chronic pain in her neck and lower back. Shealy wanted to know if a specific electromagnetic therapy would help alleviate her symptoms.
And Myss read the woman's energy field and gave Shealy an immediate, unequivocal answer. She said, absolutely not.
Why not?
Well, it wasn't that the machine was faulty. It was that the woman simply did not possess enough internal power in her system to utilize the energetic treatment. Myss could see that this woman's entire identity, her entire sense of self-worth and power, was externally vested in micromanaging and controlling the lives of her adult children.
She had no internal reservoir of power. Her battery was entirely plugged into other people.
Exactly. When your energy is entirely deployed outside of your body, like worrying about others, trying to manipulate outcomes, demanding attention, you leave your own physical structure completely devoid of the energy required to maintain cellular health.
So the treatment wouldn't even have fuel to work with.
Right. Myss pointed out that unless this woman was willing to confront her pathological need to control her children and call her energy back into her own body, no external treatment would ever work.
Wow.
Whether she tried acupuncture, psychotherapy, or an electromagnetic machine, she would just be chronicling her complaints for an hour a week without ever fundamentally changing her biology. If you lack internal power, your body literally cannot manufacture the resources needed to heal.
Which introduces a massive philosophical shift, moving us to the third principle. You alone can help yourself heal. And here, Mrs. draws a hard, definitive line between the concept of curing and the concept of healing.
This distinction is arguably the most important paradigm shift in the book. Curing is a passive process. It is what happens when you hand your authority over to an external figure, like a doctor or a surgeon.
Right.
You take a prescribed antibiotic or you undergo surgery to excise a tumor or mask a symptom. Now, curing is incredibly valuable. It can arrest the physical progression of a disease and save your life. But curing does not address the underlying energetic blueprint that allowed the disease to manifest in the first place.
I think about it like a punctured tire. Curing is taking the car to the mechanic, letting them slap a rubber patch over the hole, and paying them so you can get back on the road.
That's a great way to look at it.
But healing is doing the active, frustrating work of figuring out why you keep choosing to steer your car over the exact same bed of nails every single morning on your way to work. If you only focus on the patch and you refuse to investigate your driving habits, you are guaranteed to get another flat tire.
That analogy holds up perfectly. Healing is active. It is an internal investigation. It requires you to ruthlessly examine your attitudes, your memories, and your defense mechanisms.
It's hard work.
Very hard. You have to actively identify and release the toxic beliefs that originally scrambled your cellular frequency. And the tragedy of human nature is that we will often fiercely protect the behaviors that are killing us.
There is a profoundly heavy story in the book that demonstrates this. Miss was leading a workshop in Europe, and she met a woman named Anna. Anna was an HIV-positive prostitute from Denmark.
Oh, that story's heartbreaking.
It is. She had a very diminutive, almost childlike demeanor, but she was in obvious physical pain. She was limping heavily because a client had recently assaulted her and broken several of her ribs.
It is a devastating portrait of vulnerability.
Yeah.
During a break in the workshop, Miss had been discussing how addictions actively siphon energy away from the healing process. Anna approached her, looking for a loophole. She asked, "But Caroline, how bad could it really be to smoke just 2 cigarettes a day?"
And when Miss looked at Anna using symbolic sight, what she saw was chilling.
Miss evaluated Anna's energy circuits. She realized that if she were somehow holding the literal biological cure for AIDS in her left hand and a single cigarette in her right hand, and she told Anna to choose between them, a terrifying bypass would occur.
Wait, really?
Yes. Anna's conscious, rational mind would desperately want the cure. She would want to live. But her energetic anatomy had been so severely hijacked by trauma and addiction that her internal circuits would completely bypass the cure and latch onto the addiction.
That is just awful.
Her addictions had literally rewired her energetic pathways, routing her life force away from reasoning and healing and directly into self-destruction.
It totally redefines what an addiction is. It's not just a bad habit or a lack of willpower. It is an energetic parasite that fundamentally reroutes your biology.
Exactly.
So if we accept these principles that our biography encodes into our cells that we need internal power and that we have to actively heal rather than just passively cure, the logical question is, where is all of this happening? How do we map out an invisible energetic history?
This is where Merce's academic background in theology merged perfectly with her medical intuition. During a lecture, she had a massive realization. She recognized that she didn't need to invent a new map of the human energy system because the map already existed.
It had been there all along.
Right. It had existed for thousands of years. She realized that 3 of the world's major spiritual traditions were all describing the exact same biological and spiritual architecture, just using different cultural vocabularies.
She correlates the 7 Hindu chakras, the 7 Christian sacraments, and the Kabbalistic tree of life.
Yes, the synthesis is amazing.
I want us to take our time here, because throwing around terms like sephiro and sacraments without context is just word soup. Let's break down what these 3 systems actually are before we fuse them together.
Good idea. Let's start with the Hindu chakras. The word chakra translates roughly to wheel. In ancient Vedic texts, these are described as 7 spinning wheels of electromagnetic energy located along the central axis of the body, starting from the base of the spine and ending at the crown of the head.
So they run vertically.
Yes. Each chakra acts as a specific data bank, regulating the flow of energy to particular organs and governing specific psychological and emotional themes like survival, creativity, or communication.
Okay, so that's the Eastern model. Then Miss brings in the Christian sacraments. Now, if you grew up in a traditional Christian church, you think of a sacrament as a ritual. A priest pours water on a baby, or a couple exchanges rings at an altar. It's a ceremony. How does that map to a biological energy wheel?
Miss strips the sacraments of their purely religious institutional dogma. She looks at them symbolically. A sacrament, in its purest theological sense, is an infusion of divine grace into the human experience.
Okay, Grace.
Myss realized that the 7 traditional sacraments, baptism, communion, confirmation, marriage, confession, ordination, and extreme unction, are not just arbitrary church rituals. They represent 7 distinct stages of human empowerment and spiritual maturation.
So they align with developmental stages.
Exactly. They mark the exact same developmental milestones as the 7 chakras.
And then we add the most complex layer,
Yeah.
the Kabbalistic tree of life, which originates in Jewish mysticism. Kabbalah describes the universe and the human soul through the framework of 10 sephirot.
Right. The sephirot, which translates to emanations, are the 10 attributes or channels through which the infinite divine reveals itself and continuously creates both the physical realm and the chain of higher metaphysical realms.
Basically the structure of the cosmos.
Exactly, and the internal structure of the human soul. Now, there are 10 sephirot, but Myss aligns them with the 7 chakras because in Kabbalistic anatomy, the lower 6 sephirot group together into distinct pairings or singular focal points that perfectly map over the lower chakras, creating a unified 7-level system.
But why does it matter that a Hindu mystic, a Catholic theologian, and a Jewish Kabbalist all essentially drew the same diagram? What does this synthesis actually prove?
It proves universality. It demonstrates that human beings are fundamentally, structurally built the exact same way.
Regardless of belief.
Right. If you hold on to bitter, unresolved anger, that energetic frequency is going to be just as biologically toxic in a Jewish body as it is in a Christian body, a Hindu body, or the body of a staunch atheist.
So it's not about religion.
No. These ancient traditions aren't just collections of moral rules designed to keep ancient populations in line. They are an inherent, objective biological blueprint. Together, they form what Myss calls the 7 sacred truths.
Let me ask you a question that immediately comes to mind.
Sure.
If this blueprint has been available in these traditions for millennia, why didn't humanity figure out the medical application of this centuries ago? Why did it take a medical intuitive in the late 20th century to finally say, hey, these are all the same thing, and they dictate our cellular health?
That is the core of Myss's broader sociological argument. She asserts that humanity is currently undergoing a massive, unprecedented evolutionary shift in consciousness.
How so?
For the vast majority of human history, our relationship with the divine, regardless of the religion, has been a child-parent relationship. Religion was fundamentally about survival and protection.
You prayed for a good harvest.
Exactly. You prayed to an external parental deity to protect your tribe from famine, to protect your village from invading armies, to spare your family from the plague. The focus was entirely external, and humanity was in a state of spiritual dependency.
But we aren't living in ancient agrarian tribes anymore.
Exactly. Our primary threats are no longer saber-toothed tigers or neighboring tribes burning our crops. Our primary crises are internal: autoimmune disorders, existential depression, chronic stress.
That makes a lot of sense.
We are shifting out of spiritual childhood and moving into what Myss calls spiritual adulthood. As spiritual adults, we can no longer afford to passively pray for an external God to magically fix our biology.
We have to step up.
Right. We are being mandated to recognize ourselves as active co-creators of our reality. We have to learn to read our own physical bodies as living scripture. We must take total responsibility for the energy we generate.
That is a staggering paradigm shift. It is both empowering and intimidating. So let's learn how to read this scripture. Let's start mapping the anatomy of the spirit, beginning from the ground up. The system is divided into 3 sections. We start with the foundation of external power, which encompasses chakras 1, 2, and 3. These energy centers govern our relationship to the physical world around us.
We begin with level 1. This merges the first chakra, the root or tribal center, located at the base of the spine, with the Christian sacrament of baptism and the Kabbalistic sephira of Shekinah, which represents the presence of God in the material world.
The sacred truth associated with this level is all is one.
This first energy center is entirely about the tribe. It governs our group identity, our primal instinct for physical survival, and our foundational familial bonds. Think about the energy of a pack. In ancient times, to be exiled from the tribe meant certain death. Symbolically, the sacrament of baptism is the ritual of a community, a tribe formally accepting responsibility for a new physical life and binding that child to the group's collective energy and values.
So biologically, if this is our foundation, where does this energy manifest in the physical body?
It manifests in the foundational support structures. The first chakra feeds energy to your immune system, your legs, your bones, your joints, and your spine. This is the literal scaffolding of your body.
And what happens if that energy is messed up?
Well, consider what happens when we violate the sacred truth that all is one. If you hold deep-seated systemic prejudice against another group of people, or if you harbor toxic, irreconcilable hatred toward your own biological family, you are polluting your root energy.
You're attacking the foundation.
Exactly. When that foundational energy becomes corrupted by division or tribal betrayal, the body responds by attacking its own foundation. We see this manifest physically in the form of autoimmune disorders, chronic osteoarthritis, sciatica, and mysterious bone pain. The body loses its supportive integrity because the spirit has lost its tribal integrity.
Which moves us out of the collective tribe and into the realm of one-on-one duality.
Yes.
This is the second chakra, located in the lower abdomen. It governs relationships. The sacred truth here is honor one another. This corresponds to the sacrament of communion and the sephira of Yesod, which represents the foundation of generation and reproduction.
As we move up from the root, the unified tribal energy splits into duality. Male and female, yin and yang, light and dark. This chakra governs the primary energies we use to negotiate and interact with other human beings in the physical world. Sex, money, and creativity.
These are the tools of physical survival.
Yes. And if we look at communion symbolically, it's the act of breaking bread with others. It's an acknowledgement that everyone we share a union with, whether a spouse, a business partner, or an adversary, is in our life by a deliberate, divine design.
But relationships are inherently messy, and this is where we seem to hemorrhage personal power the most.
We bleed power here constantly because our instinct is always to control. We lose power in the second chakra whenever we try to assert dominance over someone else, or conversely, when we allow someone else to control us through financial manipulation or sexual dominance.
It's all about control.
Exactly. In Myss's framework, every relationship acts as a mirror. The people in our lives are spiritual messengers. Their behavior reflects our own internal strengths, unresolved wounds, and shadow traits. The energetic drain happens when we try to aggressively control the mirror, the other person, instead of analyzing the reflection they are showing us.
Okay, I have to stop you again because this is a concept that always triggers people, and rightly so.
It definitely does.
If someone wrongs me, if someone embezzles money from my business, or if someone is emotionally abusive, Myss is arguing that they are just a teacher reflecting a shadow side of myself. Doesn't that border dangerously on victim blaming?
It can feel that way, yes.
Why do I have to search for a profound spiritual lesson in someone else's objectively toxic behavior? Why can't a bad person just be a bad person and I'm the innocent victim?
It is a deeply uncomfortable concept, and your reaction is incredibly common. But this is exactly where we have to re-engage the concept of symbolic sight. We have to separate the moral reality from the energetic reality.
Okay, explain that.
Myss is absolutely not saying that bad behavior is morally acceptable. She is not saying you shouldn't call the police, seek legal justice, or remove yourself from an abusive situation immediately.
So it's not a moral pardon.
No.
Yeah.
But energetically, you have to look at where your life force is flowing. If someone deeply wrongs you and you spend the next 5 years obsessing over their flaws, plotting your revenge, and recounting your victimization to anyone who will listen, they are not losing energy. You are.
Oh, wow.
You are voluntarily opening a vein and pouring your second chakra energy into their memory. You are keeping a toxic connection alive.
You are paying the rent for them to live in your head, and the currency is your cellular health.
Exactly. To heal, you must detach from the teacher and focus solely on the lesson. And the lesson doesn't mean you were secretly abusive too. The lesson might simply be that you have a catastrophic lack of personal boundaries that you need to fix. The lesson might be that you are too easily seduced by financial promises. But the moment you detach from their personality and integrate the lesson into your own growth, you sever the energy cord.
And if you don't?
If you don't, your second chakra continues to bleed out, which physically leads to chronic conditions in the reproductive organs, the bladder, the lower back, and the hips.
Which perfectly sets up the necessity of the next level. If you are going to set boundaries, you need a strong sense of self.
Yeah.
We move up to the third chakra, located at the solar plexus. This is the center of personal power.
Yes.
The sacred truth is honor oneself. This links to the sacrament of confirmation and the pairing of the Sephironeza and Hod, which balance endurance with majesty.
This is the core of our individual identity. It regulates our self-esteem, our self-respect, and that deep, undeniable gut intuition.
Like when you just know something is wrong?
Right. Symbolically, the Christian sacrament of confirmation is the rite of passage where a young person formally transitions from childhood to adulthood. It is the moment they step forward and say, I am taking personal responsibility for my own spiritual life, independent of the beliefs of my parents or my tribe.
Myss outlines 4 highly specific stages that every human being must navigate to fully develop this personal power. The first stage is revolution.
Revolution is the initial, often messy act of separation. It occurs when you look around at your family, your religion, or your peer group and you realize, I don't actually believe what you believe.
That takes guts.
It requires immense energy to voice that dissent and separate from the collective thought of the first chakra tribe.
Once you revolt, you enter the second stage, involution.
Involution is the quiet, intense phase of self-inquiry. You've stripped away the tribal identity, but now you have to figure out what replaces it. You're constantly asking, who am I? What are my actual morals? What do I truly value?
Like a soul-searching phase.
It is a period of deep internal assessment that requires a lot of psychological stamina because you often feel completely unmoored.
And that leads to the third stage, which is the most controversial point in this section of the book. Narcissism. Myss argues that narcissism is a necessary, required phase of development on the path to genuine personal power.
Yes.
When I read that, it felt completely counterintuitive because we are taught to view narcissism purely as a destructive personality disorder.
It does shock the system to hear it framed positively. We associate narcissism with vanity and cruelty, but Myss is using it in an energetic context.
Thought so.
When you have finally birthed a new, authentic, independent sense of self through involution, that new identity is incredibly fragile. You have to be fiercely, unapologetically protective of it.
Oh, I see.
You have to focus entirely on your own needs, your own voice, and your own path to ensure this new identity survives the pressure of the outside world. It is a phase of intense self-absorption.
She actually uses a historical figure to illustrate this, which blew my mind. She points out that Mother Teresa, during the early days of establishing her specific mission to serve the poor in Calcutta, was widely viewed by her own religious community as being intensely self-absorbed, difficult, and narcissistic.
It is a brilliant example. Mother Teresa had received a highly specific internal calling. To manifest that calling, she had to completely ignore the established rules, the doubts of her superiors, and the traditional pathways of her order.
She had to be entirely consumed by her own internal vision.
Right. To the outside observer, that looks like stubborn narcissism.
Yeah.
But energetically, she was just consolidating her power. She had to fiercely guard the perimeter of her identity until it was strong enough to withstand the environment.
And once that power is fully consolidated, you reach the fourth and final stage, evolution.
Evolution is the culmination of the third chakra. This is when you finally take your fully formed, highly principled self out into the world. You no longer need to aggressively defend your boundaries or act narcissistic because your identity is absolutely solid.
You just are who you are.
You maintain your integrity naturally. You don't have to convince anyone of who you are. You just are it.
So if we look at what we've built so far, we have our tribal foundation, chakra 1. We know how to navigate dual relationships, chakra 2. And we have forged an unbreakable, independent sense of self, chakra 3.
Right. The external foundation is set.
We've mastered the physical world. But this brings us to the crucial turning point of the entire anatomical system. We cannot stay in the physical realm forever. We must cross the bridge from the external physical world into the internal spiritual world.
And that bridge is the heart.
Exactly. Section 5, the power of the heart.
The fourth chakra is the absolute fulcrum of human anatomy. It is the center of emotional power. The sacred truth here is love is divine power.
Beautiful.
It connects to the sacrament of marriage and the central Sephira of Tiferet, which represents compassion, beauty, and the harmonization of all the lower and higher energies.
This is where we process love, grief, hatred, and forgiveness, and symbolically misinterprets the sacrament of marriage not just as a legal union between two people, but as the internal union of the self with the divine. It is the vow to love and honor yourself.
It's profound.
But the concept she introduces here that I found the most piercing is the idea of wound power. If there's one chapter in this book that perfectly diagnoses modern culture, it is this one.
Wound power is arguably the defining psychological epidemic of our era. Wound power is the deeply ingrained habit of using our past traumas, our tragedies, and our victimhood as social and energetic currency.
So true.
Instead of healing our wounds, we curate them. We use them to manipulate other people's behavior, to elicit guaranteed sympathy, or to permanently excuse ourselves from taking the risk of personal growth.
We wear our trauma like an impenetrable shield. It sounds like I can't possibly commit to this relationship because my parents had a terrible divorce, so you have to accommodate my distance.
Yeah.
Or I can't be expected to succeed in this career because I was treated unfairly by a former boss. It is weaponized victimhood.
And Miss is very clear. The initial wound is real, the trauma you suffered was unfair, and it deserves profound compassion.
Right. We're not invalidating the pain.
Not at all. But the danger lies in converting that temporary traumatic event into a permanent identity. Because when you build your power base around your wounds, you are biologically devastating yourself. When you live in your wounds, you are constantly channeling your life force backward into the past.
And because biography becomes biology, your body is listening to that broadcast.
Precisely. If your mind is constantly broadcasting the frequency of the trauma, your cellular receptors are constantly receiving the chemical equivalent of that trauma.
It's like you're reliving it cellularly.
You are directing your cells to literally recreate the biological state of being victimized over and over again. Your fourth chakra gets completely congested. Physically, this manifests as coronary artery disease, asthma, lung cancer, and breast cancer. You are quite literally suffocating your own heart center with the past.
So, if you are relying on wound power, you are essentially drinking poison every morning and hoping the person who wronged you dies. It is entirely self-destructive.
Very much so.
And Miss is unequivocal about the cure. She states that forgiveness is not just a high-minded moral ideal. It is a strict, undeniable biological necessity for physical survival.
This is where people struggle the most, because we fundamentally misunderstand what forgiveness is. We think forgiveness means saying, what you did to me is okay. We think it means absolving the perpetrator of their guilt, or forgetting that the abuse happened, or inviting a toxic person back into our lives.
Which sounds impossible for a lot of traumas.
Of course, but Miss argues that true forgiveness has absolutely nothing to do with the other person.
It is actually a profoundly selfish act.
It is the ultimate act of biological self-preservation. Forgiveness is the conscious, deliberate choice to liberate your own psyche from the agonizing need for personal vengeance.
Taking your power back.
Right. It is the act of recalling your vital energy from the past and pulling it back into present time so you actually have enough energetic voltage to heal your physical tissue today. You aren't pardoning the criminal, you are cutting the wire that allows them to siphon your battery.
But practically, how do you execute that? Because deciding to forgive intellectually is one thing, but emotionally releasing the anger is agonizing work. How does Miss suggest we actually perform this surgery on the heart?
She provides a very grounded step-by-step mechanism. Step 1 requires brutal honesty. You have to clearly identify the wound, and you have to ask yourself, how am I currently using this wound for power?
Oh.
Are you using it to control your spouse? Are you using it as an excuse to avoid failure? You must identify the payoff.
You have to admit that you like the sympathy.
Yes. Step 2 is incredibly difficult. You have to find the good that came from the experience. You have to shift out of the consciousness of victimization and into a consciousness of appreciation.
Finding the silver lining.
What strength did you develop because of that hardship? Did it force you to become more independent? Did it make you more empathetic to others?
And then the final step.
The final step is an act of will. You have to consciously declare that you are releasing the authority that the past holds over your biology. You must recognize that continuing to play the victim is an active daily choice that is physically destroying your heart. You choose your health over your righteous anger.
Once you do that, once a heart center is cleared of the past and the bridge is open, we transition into the final, most elevated stage of the anatomy. This is section 6. Ascending to internal power and the divine.
Yes, the upper chakras.
We're moving into chakras 5, 6, and 7, where our personal rational mind must learn to interface with the impersonal divine mind.
We begin this ascent at the 5th chakra, located in the throat. This is the center of willpower. The sacred truth is surrender personal will to divine will.
The throat chakra.
This center links to the sacrament of confession and the dynamic Kabbalistic pairing of Gevura, which is strict judgment and discipline, and Hesed, which is loving kindness and mercy.
The throat chakra is our center of self-expression, of choice, and of karma. It governs the thyroid, the trachea, the neck, and the esophagus. And the detail that absolutely fascinated me here is how Miss categorizes the act of lying.
Oh, this is fascinating.
She doesn't just treat lying as a moral failing. She identifies it as literal physical poison.
The mechanics of this are just fascinating. We talked earlier about how the energy system is fundamentally objective. It is pure data. Because it is objective, it immediately recognizes when you are introducing a distortion of reality into the field.
Like a glitch.
Right. When you tell a lie, whether it is a malicious lie to deceive someone else or a rationalized lie you tell yourself to avoid facing a hard truth, you create a conflicting frequency in your fifth chakra.
It's like playing two discordant notes on a piano at the same time.
Exactly. It creates an energetic dissonance. Your spirit knows the truth, but your throat is vibrating with a falsehood. This dissonance acts like an energetic blockade.
Wow.
If you chronically suppress your true voice, or if you live a life that is fundamentally inauthentic, you choke off the energy flowing through the center. This is why we see people who swallow their truth for decades suddenly develop thyroid disorders, chronic sore throats, or vocal cord issues. The biology is breaking down under the strain of the energetic contradiction.
Which gives a totally new dimension to the sacrament of confession. Growing up, confession was just a guilt trip. You sit in a dark wooden box, you list your sins to a priest, and you hope God isn't too angry. But Myss strips that away.
She redefines confession entirely. It isn't about groveling before a punishing authority figure. Symbolically, confession is the necessary biological act of purging energetic distortions from your system.
Getting the poison out.
Exactly. It is the act of speaking the unvarnished truth out loud so that your energy can flow clearly again. When you confess, when you admit you are wrong or admit that you are unhappy in your career, you retrieve your spirit from the negative acts of your own will. You clear the throat chakra.
And clearing the throat allows the energy to rise to the sixth chakra, the mind. The sacred truth here is seek only the truth. This is located at the center of the forehead, often referred to as the third eye.
Yes.
It is linked to the sacrament of ordination and the highest cognitive sephiro of Bina, which is intuitive understanding, and Chokmah, which is raw wisdom.
The sixth chakra is where the intellect finally merges with the spiritual. It regulates the brain, the neurological system, the pineal gland, and the pituitary gland. The central task of this chakra is mastering the profound difference between the personal mind and the impersonal mind.
Let's unpack that, because it sounds subtle, but it represents a massive leap in how a person actually experiences daily life. What is the personal mind?
The personal mind is the ego. It is entirely attached to outcomes. It judges every single event based on a very narrow metric. How does this affect me right now?
Right.
If you get a promotion, the personal mind is thrilled. If you get a flat tire, the personal mind is devastated and believes the universe is punishing you. The personal mind panics when things change because it desperately wants to control the physical world.
It is inherently reactive and anxious.
Completely. The impersonal mind, however, is detached. It observes life symbolically, like we discussed with symbolic sight. The impersonal mind understands that change is constant, and it doesn't label events as strictly good or bad.
It's more neutral.
Yes. It seeks the deeper truth behind the event. When a relationship ends, the impersonal mind doesn't spiral into victimhood. It asks, what is the truth this situation is trying to show me about myself? It is the transition from agonizing over why is this happening to me to calmly asking, what is the lesson here?
And that transition is what Myss aligns with the sacrament of ordination. Again, she reinterprets it. Ordination isn't about going to seminary and becoming a literal priest. It is an internal posture.
Exactly.
It is recognizing that whatever you do in the physical world, whether you are a school teacher, an accountant, a stay-at-home parent, or a carpenter, can become a sacred path of service if you execute it with the energy of the impersonal mind, bringing wisdom and truth to the task without being attached to the glory.
When you can operate from the impersonal mind, you are no longer buffeted by the daily anxieties of the world. You have achieved a profound level of internal stabilization, which prepares you for the final, ultimate center of the human energy system, the seventh chakra, the spirit.
Located at the crown of the head. The sacred truth is live in the present moment. It connects to the sacrament of extreme unction, or last rites, and the highest Kabbalistic sephira, Keter, which represents the crown and the infinite light of the divine.
This center governs the central nervous system, the muscular system, and the skin. This is our direct energetic umbilical cord to the transcendent. But Myss is very clear that opening this chakra is not a blissful floating experience.
No.
Not at all. To fully activate the seventh chakra, a person almost always has to endure a profound, agonizing spiritual crisis, which classical theology calls the dark night of the soul.
This concept, originally articulated by the 16th century mystic St. John of the Cross, is so critical for people to understand because when it happens, you feel like you are losing your mind.
You feel entirely unmoored. During a dark night of the soul, your carefully constructed identity crumbles. Everything that used to bring you comfort, your career, your relationships, your religious beliefs, suddenly feels completely hollow and meaningless. You feel entirely abandoned by the divine. It is an existential void.
Myss includes a story about a healer named Ron that frames this perfectly. Ron explains that the profound feeling of abandonment during the dark night is not actually a punishment. It is the ultimate spiritual test.
Ron suggests that the silence of the divine during this crisis is actually a question being posed to the soul. The divine is essentially asking, are you capable of believing in me, of trusting the process of the universe even when you are in absolute darkness and cannot feel my presence?
That's a brutal test.
It is the ultimate test of faith without evidence. If you can endure that darkness without collapsing back into the victimhood of the lower chakras, you emerge transformed. You move beyond belief and into knowing. That is when true ordained healing power activates.
But I want to circle back to the sacred truth of this chakra because it raises a very difficult emotional challenge. The truth is live in the present moment. The sacrament of extreme unction is symbolically about releasing the dying spirit, bringing final closure, and not carrying the dead with us.
Yes.
Ms. argues that it is biologically unnatural to live in the past, and that carrying the dead makes us diseased. But how on earth do we reconcile that with normal human grief? If a listener has lost a child or a spouse or a lifelong friend, how can you possibly tell them that they are making themselves sick by mourning?
It is an incredibly delicate point, and Miss handles it with profound care. We must be clear. Grief is an absolute, unavoidable, necessary human reality. When you lose someone you love, the heart breaks and the tears must fall. The danger is not the grief itself.
What is the danger, then?
The danger is allowing what Miss calls tribal illusions to dictate your timeline for healing.
What exactly does she mean by tribal illusions?
The tribe, our culture, our society, our psychology textbooks dictates arbitrary rules about how long suffering should last. The tribe tells us it takes exactly 1 year to get over a divorce, or if you lose a child, you will be broken forever, you will never fully recover.
And we just accept that.
Because we want to belong to the tribe, we buy into these timelines, we believe them. And because biography becomes biology, by believing them, we command our cellular structure to manifest them. We unconsciously order our spirits to remain in a state of suffering for a predetermined amount of linear time to prove to the tribe that we cared.
We use the duration of our suffering as proof of our love.
Exactly. But Miss argues that the spirit operates entirely outside of linear time. The spirit is not bound by the clock. If your spiritual connection is strong enough, and if you continually practice calling your energy back to the present moment, you have the capacity to heal a profound trauma rapidly.
Healing rapidly doesn't mean you stop loving the person who died.
Not at all. You don't forget them, and your love for them remains eternally intact in the fourth chakra. But you stop allowing the event of their death, the tragedy of their physical absence, to constantly siphon your life force out of today and into yesterday.
That makes a lot of sense.
You pull your spirit completely into the present moment, which is the only place where the divine can be accessed, and the only place where biological healing can actually occur.
It's about pulling your spirit out of yesterday, so your body actually has enough energy to survive today. That is the ultimate anatomy of the spirit. So, as we step back and look at this massive, comprehensive map from the tribal roots all the way up to the transcendent crown, we have to evaluate its practical impact. Section 7. Why this book matters. Why should the listener go out and digest this entire text themselves?
Anatomy of the Spirit is a masterpiece because it successfully builds a sturdy, logical bridge between two worlds that have historically been at war. The clinical, allopathic world of Western medicine, and the mystical, intuitive world of Eastern healing.
It finally connects them.
Miss takes the esoteric and makes it entirely practical. She strips away the New Age fluff, she bypasses religious dogma, and she presents spirituality not as a moral accessory, but as a strict, mechanical, biological necessity. It's not just a nice idea to forgive someone, it is a cellular mandate.
It grounds the invisible. It gives you a literal blueprint to diagnose your own life. So who is the ideal reader for this? Obviously, it is essential reading for anyone dealing with chronic illness who feels like conventional medicine is only putting patches on the tire, but never finding the nail.
Without question. If you are sick and the doctors can't find the root, you need to read this book to audit your energy. But its value extends far beyond physical illness. If you are someone who feels perpetually stuck, if you find yourself repeating the exact same toxic relationship dynamics or hitting the exact same financial walls year after year, This book gives you the diagnostic tools to locate exactly where your energy is leaking out of your system.
And finally, I would say that if you are currently in the middle of a dark night of the soul, if you feel entirely lost, if your career has collapsed, if your faith has evaporated, and you feel spiritually abandoned, this book is a lifeline.
It really is.
It provides a compassionate, structured roadmap that proves your crisis isn't a sign of madness or failure. It is a necessary, biologically wired stage of spiritual maturation.
It validates the invisible struggles we all carry, and it gives us the power to rewrite the script our bodies are following.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to carry into your week. The next time you feel a persistent physical ache, a dull pain in your lower back that won't seem to go away, a sudden tightening in your throat during a meeting, or a heavy ache in your chest, pause for a moment.
Don't immediately reach for the painkiller.
Right. Take a second to listen. Ask yourself, is this just physical aging? Did I just sleep in a strange position? Or is this my body trying to desperately communicate with me about a specific fear, a financial worry, or an unspoken truth I am flat out refusing to face? What if your body is desperately trying to have a conversation with you in the only language it knows?
If you learn to decode that language, you stop being a passive victim of your biology, and you become the conscious co-creator of your health.
If you want to keep having these kinds of transformative conversations, make sure you subscribe to the Book Nook so you never miss a deep dive into the source material that matters.
The journey to understanding the architecture of ourselves is complex and ongoing, and we are absolutely thrilled to be navigating it with you.
And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which book you'd like us to explore next. We read every single one.